Our next speaker is Dr. Gail Bradbrook. Dr. Gail Bradbrook has been researching, planning, and training for mass civil disobedience since 2010, and is the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion. She has been at the front of talks on the psychology of active participation and the need for civil disobedience. And she was recently named as one of the top 50 influencers in the UK by DGQ. So thanks a lot, Dr. Gail. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to dedicate what I'm saying today to our HS2 protectors who are currently in a tunnel under Euston. Courageous people. COVID-19 is not a distraction from the climate and ecological emergency, because it is the climate and ecological emergency. It's making it clear that we need to stop factory farming right now, or phase it out, because that's where the next pandemic may well arise from. And we also need to stop destroying biodiversity, including through this white elephant airport expansion service known as HS2. COVID-19 is exacerbating the deep inequalities in the UK and globally that are a result of our current inhuman and chosen political economy. Within our global human family, we are not safe until all of us are safe. And this requires a deep rewiring of our political economic system so that power and resources are shared more equally. Inequality in the world of COVID not only shows up in the murder by the UK government of its key workers and vulnerable citizens, 115,500 plus so far, it shows up in the inability of poor countries to vaccinate their population in the way that vaccines are being grabbed by richer countries. And when I say the UK government is murdering its citizens, I am merely quoting a recent British medical journal editorial. It's now a matter of biological science that we need more equality. None of us are safe until all of us are safe, because the virus can mutate into new forms if it infects vast sections of any given population. As Tim said, you know, if the UK wants to recover from this pandemic, it's got to think as a global citizen. A Frontier science paper from January this year, 17 ecological scientists in institutions spanning the globe said, the scale of the threats to the biosphere and all its life forms, including humanity, is in fact so great that it is difficult to grasp, even for well-informed experts. 2020 research commissioned by the MOD said we're heading towards 3.5 degrees of warming, and that's assuming we're hitting our Paris Agreement targets, which we're not. And the report warns that as early as 2030, the world could face a perfect storm of food, water, and energy crises. Now, Sir David King and Professor Michael Mann are among scientists saying that we don't have carbon budget left, that climate tipping points are already being breached. A very recent paper for Nature Climate Change says that we are already committed to 2 degrees of warming. I want to mourn today that we have failed in our Paris Agreement to protect vulnerable countries by staying around 1.5 degrees of warming. It's over, folks. We've already gone over the limits. There is a glimmer of hope, however, in that paper that says if we rapidly reduce emissions, then the 2 degrees of warming might not hit till much later, meaning adaptation is more possible and potentially removal of CO2 later, but it starts with rapid reductions right now. Last June, the government's own Climate Change Committee issued a warning to prepare for a 4-degree warmer world. And in 2008, however, it said it's potentially beyond our ability to adapt. In fact, there is, according to Kevin Anderson of the Tyndall Centre, a widespread view that 4 degrees C is incompatible with an organised global community. So what we're talking about is that we're facing the collapse of our civilization, and that will be resulting in billions of people dying, according to Johan Rockström of the Potsdam Institute on Climate Impact Research. Estimates suggest it's already 300,000 people dying annually of climate change, with air pollution killing 64,000 people in the UK. As ever, those with the least responsibility here and overseas pay the hardest price first. Shell spent 22 million lobbying against climate policies And the banks are increasing funding of new fossil fuels, $2.7 trillion since the Paris Agreement. And 15% of this comes from the UK. HSBC, 87 billion, Barclays, 118 billion. And the banks are also funding biodiversity destruction, enabling tax dodging as well, which robs exploited countries in a form of neo-colonialism. Mark Carney said the policies of businesses commit us to 3.7 degrees of warming. Let's just take this in, you know, the policies of corporations and government that are not in alignment with acting like we are currently in an absolute emergency are the policies of those committing crimes against humanity. The reason the government isn't being properly held accountable for the social murder through COVID-19 of its own citizens and for these terrible policies related to the CEE is that the press is largely captured by billionaires with vested interests. This right now is a plutocracy and corporatocracy, not a functioning democracy. The World Economic Forum, the elites at Davos, have called for a great reset, naming that this political economy is over and that the depths of inequality in the world are unacceptable. The recent Das Gupta review also holds our economic system accountable for the ravaging of the natural world. The system has to change. These harmful behaviours are incentivized in a psychopathic system. It's got very little to do with bad actors, but the system will resist change, less through denial now and more through delay and greenwashing. It wants to pretend we can have green growth, we can't, and that we can transition with a no value lost to banks, corporations, and those of us who are richer. It's another deception. An emergency means acting now. It means there's a price to pay if we want to save our kids' future and stop killing people across the world. Change will not come without social movements pressurizing for this change. And that's why Extinction Rebellion calls on all people to support us behind the scenes or to join us in acts of peaceful civil disobedience, if you can, because that is how change happens. And whilst the change that XR has already brought about is celebrating, there's also a move to call us extremists. Expect this more this year in a strategy to silence us while the UK government hosts COP26 and wants to push a greenwashing agenda. We won't be silenced by a fake process run by people who've been in a business with those expanding the right-wing propaganda machine of the media. As this paradigm collapses, in the words of the economist at Deutsche Bank, modern civilization is screwed. We have before us a stark choice. We have to move in a direction, and it's one of more democracy or less democracy. And in Extinction Rebellion, we don't tell people what we think the solutions are. We call for citizens' assemblies, especially a global citizens' assembly this year, to decide on how to change our political economy so that it can maximize well-being and minimize harm. And while you may feel today my pain and rage, I consider all of us here, my beloved brothers and sisters. We are part of one beautiful human family. It's time to put down our ideological differences, look at each other afresh, and sort out this mess. We should take all the opportunities we have to repair the harm that has already been done. In that way, I finish with a request to help heal the harm. So Mark, I have been asked to pass on this message to you from Lazarus Tamana, the president of the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People. And he says, with your expertise in responsible leadership, your history of being a former chairman of Shell, and the recent judgment that the Ogoni people and other farmers are now able to sue a subsidiary of Shell for vast pollution caused years ago, of which our people still suffer, also given previous rulings that a complete cleanup of these lands is necessary, that were never acted upon, would you please be willing to publicly call on Shell to demonstrate its willing to be a good corporate citizen and act swiftly now in paying for this cleanup? And thank you, everybody.